Absolutely. Thank you so much, Patty. It's a pleasure. All right. Leave it. Yeah, okay. Okay. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I did. Our next set of guests are distinguished guests Matt Michaelis and Eric Connors in conversation with my good friend Steve Ramirez. Eric is originally from the East Bay, so he's kind of bailed and moved over to the peninsula, but he's originally from the East Bay. Matt is chairman and CEO of Emprise Bank, and he comes all the way from Wichita, Kansas today. And Emprise Bank is a Kansas-based family-owned community bank headquartered in Wichita, as I said, with more than $1 billion in assets. He will be talking about his interest in fintech from a community bank perspective. We kind of always see that fintech and what's happening in tech is more interesting for the larger banks, but the community banks also want to have that kind of high touch, but also high tech differentiation. Matt's going to be also a judge of the Startup Challenge that's going to follow in an hour or so. So stay tuned for that, as several startups are going to pitch right here. I think the number is 10, 12, and maybe one person had an emergency, so maybe 11. Eric, as I said, from the East Bay originally, is Senior Vice President in Product Management and Strategy at Ellie Mae. They are an East Bay company as well, right here in Pleasanton. Eric has had several years in the fintech space, being a pioneer in PFM. So when you hear about virtual banks, neobanks, the Wells Fargo's Greenhouse, JP Morgan Chase Fin, they're all talking about Fin, and Eric knows a little bit about them because he was doing that in Yodlee, Eric, like 10 years ago? Yeah, okay. PFM is an integral part of digital banks. We covered that. His focus at Ellie Mae is to lead product strategy, product management, and compliance organization, translating Ellie Mae's business strategy into a set of tangible product priorities and roadmaps. So please welcome Steve, Eric, and Matt.
Good afternoon, everybody. Very nice to be here, start this conversation. I'm usually loud enough. Can everybody hear me? I'm usually loud. I'm not usually the quietest person in the room, so I'm usually okay. All right, so in this conversation today, this really is a conversation, I think, first here on stage, but I'm also hoping to have some time to be able to engage your thoughts and your questions as well. So maybe just to kind of get things kicked off, I don't know, you guys want to just do a real quick introduction, Eric, and then Matt?
Hi, I'm Eric the Trader. I left the East Bay. Yeah, I've been in fintech since before fintech was a thing. So I've been in, started in Yodlee at 2007, and so have been sort of in this space for a while. Have spent the last several years in the mortgage side of the fintech arena, so working at CoreLogic, and now at Ellie Mae. So, thanks.
Hello, I'm Matt Michaelis, Chairman and CEO of Emprise Bank. We're about $1.7 billion, headquartered in Wichita, Kansas, with far too many branches, which is part of the reason why I'm here today and believe that the fintech community is critical to our long-term success. We acknowledge that we have a lot of work in front of us to really be able to provide a high-quality digital experience to our customers, and that's really the key to our success long-term.
And I'm Stephen Ramirez. I'm the CEO of Beyond the Arc. We're an agency that focuses on customer experience and data science, and great to be here with you guys. So I think just to kind of kick things off, all FIs struggle with technology. That's probably top of the list, no matter what size you are. But I think as a community bank, there are particular kind of challenges, particularly as you start to think about how do you prioritize this huge world of possibilities. So Matt, just to kind of get us started, do you have some thoughts about what's that look like from the community bank point of view?
The list is long, unfortunately. You know, the two that really rise to the top of my list, and it's all around customer experience, but the two areas that really rise to the top of my list, one is the mobile banking capability and everything that we're able to do, or today not able to do, through the mobile channel. And the second area is just around our data and our inability to really take action off of our data in a way that's meaningful to our customers in a relevant and real-time manner.
So, Matt, I just want to follow up on that before we go to Eric. So, mobile banking, man, that's been around for a lot of years now. Why is that a challenge for the community bank?
Well, I think it's probably a challenge for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, culturally, mobile is not the channel of choice for a community bank. That's not how, you know, so most of the people that are managing the retail side of our business grew up in a branch-based world. And so that's how they think about things. They think about growing deposits, and they think about, how do I get more foot traffic in our branch? So some of it is mindset and cultural shift. You know, I do, and I hate to blame core providers, but there is a piece of this, which is we are so locked into the core provider, which, you know, they do not provide, and I'm not a deep technical person, but they don't provide the APIs and the flexibility to be able to integrate very easily either. So that really limits what we're able to do. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. It's how do you accessorize your accounts, and how do you add on some of the capabilities and features? We're very constrained around how we're able to do that.
Well, maybe that's a good transition to Eric, who has helped FIs to add functionality, features, entire platforms. So, Eric, what's your take from that community bank perspective?
Yeah, so I think the deal with the community bank is that you have to realize that they don't typically have a really big IT staff. They don't typically have a big IT budget. They are, as he said, tightly tied to their core. And so, you know, there's a couple different strategies as a vendor that we take. So, you know, when I was at Yodlee, a lot of our focus was really on delivering APIs and delivering capabilities that could be deeply integrated into your banking experience. And so in the big banks, we had a channel strategy that we would go directly to the big banks, and we would basically sell those services into them because they typically had a really big IT staff. They had a lot of people that were already investing in API strategies. They were already investing in those things. But in the community banks world, we took a channel approach where we basically partnered with core providers to embed our APIs and our experiences into the core. And then use them as a distribution channel. And so I think as a fintech provider, you sort of have to think about that strategy. Ellie Mae is a little bit different. We basically are in the mortgage space. We power, you know, the lending experience for about 40% of all mortgages that are happening in the United States today. So we have a really big preponderance of community banks and smaller credit unions and small individual brokerages and those sorts of things, mortgage brokers, et cetera. So their heritage has really been in the smaller end of the equation, and they've gradually grown up into the bigger enterprise banks. And the way that they've been successful is the mortgages sort of bolted on to core. It's a relatively lightweight integration into core. It doesn't require a bunch of deep integrations, and therefore can operate relatively separate. And so I think from a product strategy perspective, as a fintech provider, you have to think about which segment of the market you're going to go after, and, you know, talking to a community bank about how they might leverage your REST APIs or even fancier Apollo APIs, et cetera, that might not necessarily resonate with a community bank because they're going to be like, well, does the core do that? And how do I make that happen? So you have to be really cautious about sort of what segment of the market are you focusing on first, and which one are you going after, and sort of what's your sales strategy and integration strategy.
You know, Eric, you've touched on something just in passing, but I wanted to just put a little bit of focus on it. You said, you know, the community banks don't have the same size IT group. Well, you know, I think we've seen in many sources, the top 5 banks often talk about the $1 billion plus per year that they spend on maintaining their infrastructure, and the tens of thousands of people who report into IT. So is about half that for community banks? Like, what's the relative level of resource that goes into the community bank IT? I don't know, Matt, do you want to take that on first?
So we have 430 people in total. So you know, our IT staff is, you know, hands and feet, fingers and toes can probably capture everybody on our IT staff. But I think it goes beyond just headcount. It's also capability and what we're hiring for. So when you start talking about data scientists and the really advanced capabilities, we don't have any of that on staff. I mean, we have to rely on whether it's our core provider or fintech partners or others to be able to bring that expertise to the table.
So as you know, for Beyond the Arc, as a company passionate about customer experience, we see the power of AI and machine learning and transforming customer experience. You don't have those people in-house, so are those things on your radar? You kind of, you know, you're going to wait and see how it all turns out? Like, what's your take on this, on what's happening around AI, machine learning, and from your perspective?
Well, again, I would say we're going to rely on partners for that. I mean, we acknowledge and understand that is something, that is capability, those are capabilities that we will absolutely need over the course of time, if not today. Those are not capabilities that we will drive in-house. And I'll give you a great example of this. There's a company that had developed, a very small startup, that had developed some really great data capabilities in the insurance industry. And they are trying to expand into the banking industry and had asked if we would actually help them develop some product. You know, as intriguing as it was, we just simply don't have the resources. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the resources to help them be able to develop product. But if they had a product they could bring to the table, we would absolutely be an adopter of that.
Now, Eric, I know you've worked in product for many years. You've worked in and around this ecosystem. So any thoughts, you know, sort of with what Matt just said, and knowing that there are probably developers and startups in the audience, how do you help them interpret that? So what does that mean? If you've got a startup who's focused on machine learning, what do they need to do to reach Matt and his colleagues at community banks across the country?
Yeah, I think there's a couple good examples of this that are out there where they've done a really good job of reaching the community bank. I think
Kasasa.
Yeah, Kasasa, that's the one. I always want to call it Kielbasa or something like that, and I know that that's wrong every time that goes into my brain. Anyway, they are really focused on providing a full service, and if you actually look into what they do, they really have embraced this idea that the community bank doesn't have a ton of resources, and so what are the big things if you're going to roll out a new checking and ATM program? You need marketing resources, you need, you know, production resources, you need card resources, you need support resources, et cetera. And so they've bundled all of those pieces together into a service. And I think that's the approach that you need to take if you're going to focus on this market. And I think, as he rightfully points out, this market has a ton of needs. It's just like any small business. They have all the same needs of big enterprise customers. They just, and oftentimes they're more complicated than the big enterprises in a lot of ways. It's just they don't have all of the resources and time and energy and money to spend on it. And so in order to address this market, you have to be a lot smarter about what services are you going to bundle together and wrap up in such a way that they can then consume it. And it really does need to be almost a bolt-on to their core provider in some way, shape, or form. And so what you'll find in a lot of these product strategies, and most of them funnel through a core relationship and really nailing that core relationship down, whether it be as a channel partner reselling your solution or as a strategic partnership that you have so that that integration is tight and has the trust that the community bank is really going to place on that core provider. So that it really does flow through the core provider in a lot of different ways.
And we've seen, we're an FIS core bank. We've seen FIS be far more open and actually proactive about bringing in startup partners for capabilities that they don't have or where they're not best in class. So that's encouraging from our perspective that in fact we're going to see more and more capability brought to the table in a way that we can easily integrate it and leverage it and push it out to our customers.
So, you know, that sparks an interesting question, because I've been to many conferences. We've heard that conversation about banks and fintech startups partnering and sort of what that looks like. But that's often from the big bank perspective, you know, and how difficult it is to navigate and figure out who you're even talking to and the years-long process, which is all true. But I wonder, Matt, if that's a little different on the community bank side, and what's your thoughts about that fintech bank partnership?
Well, it's much different. It's much different. And, you know, I would say there are some examples where we've been able to do that very successfully, and some examples where it's been more of a struggle, largely around the integration piece. So if we look at the fintech lending capability, we partnered a couple of years ago with the fintech in the non-prime consumer lending space and provided some lending capital for them. That worked great because they got insight into how a commercial bank thinks about lending, and were able to leverage that into raising additional capital. And from our perspective, we got really great insight into online lending and a non-prime consumer sector, which was a sliver of the market that we had very limited experience in. So that worked very, very well. There are other cases where the integration or lack thereof with the core just prohibited us from being able to do anything, most notably from a PFM perspective. We spent more time than we would have liked trying to get a PFM integrated, and that just didn't work. And so I guess both sides of the equation. Some work very well, and some are a little bit more of a challenge.
And at your bank, does it also take a year or two to be able to make decisions and to be able to vet these startups?
No. But I will tell you, we've come a long ways in that regard. You know, that probably goes back to if you are looking at a bank partnership, you know, one of the things I would encourage you to evaluate very, very quickly is what is their culture around it. For a while, you know, I've been leading the bank for a fairly short period of time before my involvement. We never would have been able to make a decision around some of the partnerships that we've formed. Today, it's a reasonably, I don't want to say very, it's a reasonably quick process to figure out if it's something that's really interesting to us, that fits into the strategy of what we're trying to do, and that we have time and resources to be able to go execute on, and where we think we'll be able to be a good partner to the fintech.
Eric, any tips there for any people who are thinking about this from a startup perspective? Like, how do you form that? How do you do that kind of cultural assessment? How do you connect with the banks? What are your thoughts on this partnership topic?
Yeah, I think that the cultural fit is obviously a good one, and I think any good entrepreneurs that have reasonable sales, you know, sorts of instincts are going to be able to pick up on whether this is going to be a match or not. I do think that the key thing is to really figure out whether you want to be focused on the bigger banks or whether you want to be focused on the smaller banks. I think, especially in the startup realm, trying to focus on both ends of that equation is going to be very difficult to do, because I think the needs are very different. The culture is going to be very different as well. But I think there's benefits to both ends of the equation. I think this market in the community bank world is hungry for what everybody has to offer. They want to participate. They don't want to be left behind. They want to have solutions, but what they need is a little bit more crafted solution and a little bit more specialized for them. And you know, I think if you put that little bit of extra work in, there's a big market down there that is really hungry for these sorts of things. And I do think that picking up on the culture is just part of that sales process, to figure out whether you have a change agent in front of you, whether you have somebody that's interested in doing the work that you need them to do in order to get the deal done. I think it's much more about that, figuring that out.
Well, if you guys are open to it, I'd love to get the audience here involved as well. So if there's some questions, if you have a question for our panel here, and I don't know, Patty, do we want to just have them just shout it out, or do you want to?
Repeat the question. We have one mic here, right?
No, we don't. How about I give you one?
Any questions? Yeah, there's Rajesh. Let me run.
Patty's going to get his exercise this afternoon. It's going to be excellent.
Thank you.
That was blazing fast. Did you guys see that?
Over here. Or then it's going to be in the back over there.
Right. So one of the struggle for fintechs is how do I price it for a community banks, right? So I would like the answer from both of your perspective. But do I go into a kind of an annual contract, a 3-year contract, lock them in, or do I make it a simpler monthly subscription? What resonates with the community bank? What is the easy way to get in?
So Eric, let's start with you on that. You've worked a lot in product. I'm sure this issue of pricing is probably near and dear to your heart. So any thoughts around that?
Cheap. They want it cheap.
I would agree. Couldn't have said it better.
And the big banks want it at a discount from that. No, I think you got to think about it from the other side of it, which is where's the value generated? So how much value you're going to be generating for this particular user of it. And the economics are oftentimes different. A lot of times things are a lot more expensive for a community bank, and sometimes they're more expensive for a bigger bank. And you sort of have to understand, like, what's the value? What are you replacing? What are you causing to go away? What are you bringing to the table that they aren't? And then start from that as a point of view. You know, I think in general that everybody sort of understands the idea of volume discounts. And so my guess is that bigger banks have more buying power and expect more buying power in those equations because they feel like they're bringing you more volume in these situations. But there's plenty of use cases in the big bank that have small, you know, dealing with wealth, you know, the upper echelon of the wealth arena and those sorts of good things. So, you know, but those types of situations often have a lot more value. So I think it always comes back to that. What value you're providing? What's the next best alternative? How much does that cost? How are they pricing it? And then, you know, what are your investors looking for on the other side of it? They're all looking for some SaaS model that's got recurring revenue, that's, you know, less lumpy and all that sort of good stuff. So finding the balance between those two things is key. And I think the only way to do that and navigate that is through the value chain and figuring out how much value you bring to them.
Yeah, the couple of things that I would add to that, because I agree completely. What I hear a lot around our executive table is we're looking at digital tools, particularly ones where you know, I'll use an example, online account opening. So we don't have a particularly robust online account opening tool today. We're in the market for a new one, and as we think about pricing, you know, the level of usage that our tool today gets is almost non-existent. Our confidence around how we're going to be able to drive usage over time is a little unknown. So we're really looking for a tool where the price scales with our usage, as opposed to just a fixed monthly fee. I think we would really value more of a partnership pricing model, whereas our usage scales, the fee scales. And I know that's a little counterintuitive in that then we don't necessarily get the benefits of scale that come with that. But from our perspective, that lowers the risk on the front end of us putting in a tool to help us be able to drive more mobile traffic. So.
There's a question here.
Yeah, the question is for Eric. Right now, today's DNA, like rocket markets, your product is like mainly servicing the big banks or small banks. Do you have any tool for the startup community to build a platform for the digital markets, for the digital experience?
Yes, it's a great question. So for those of you who didn't hear it, like the question is how we offer services for lenders. Do we have any platform capabilities that are available for startups to help service this industry? So the answer to that is yes, we do. We're a little bit like core in the lending environment, in the mortgage environment. So most things that service a mortgage lender are likely going to have to integrate with our platform in some way, shape, or form. So like as an example, you need to order a credit report. All of the major credit report providers go through our platform, et cetera. So we have a set of APIs that we publish. We have a developer toolkit that's available. We have a partner toolkit that's available as well. So, you know, if you have some innovation that's happening around the mortgage space, definitely reach out to us, and we have some tools to help that. And I think we're very interested in publishing more tools to make that community more robust around this. Because, you know, the reason I'm so interested in the mortgage space and why I've sort of landed here the last couple of years is, I mean, there's a ton of paperwork still flying around this office. I mean, Like if you think about it, in the Midwest, we can buy a house for, call it $150,000. I know exactly where it's located. It cannot move. It's got an address. It's got a brick foundation, et cetera. It takes 45 days to close that loan. It takes the bank another 30 days before they get funding from that loan that they've closed. And so if you think about it, I could buy a Tesla in that same city and drive it off the lot, and you have no idea where it was. It's probably the same price or similar. And so this is an area that's totally ripe for digitization, and that really is our mission, is to automate everything automatable about the mortgage process. So anybody that's interested in helping us on that journey, we're absolutely interested in helping with that.
So before our next question, I just want to do a quick speed round here with the panel. So I'm going to just kind of reel off some technologies from the community bank perspective. I want to know, is it hot or not? All right. So let's just start off with some of the biggies. Are you ready, Matt?
Sure, sure.
All right. We'll sort of ease into it. How about cloud?
Not there yet for us.
Eric, you got a different opinion? Hot or not?
I think for the community bank's perspective, is not hot right now.
All right. How about know your customer?
Compliance is always hot.
Only a banker can say that.
Does that extend to things like digital identity? Is hot or not?
Will be as we build our digital tools more.
I think if the regulators require it, it'll become hot.
How about just reg tech in general? Is that hot or not?
No,
No. Okay.
not for us.
So why not?
We're really more focused around customer experience from a fintech perspective, and with resources where they are, or I should say limited as they are, far more focused on how do we push that to customer experience. We have a compliance. It's not perfect. We have a compliance capability that functions okay, could be more efficient, could be automated, but today really putting focus and priority around customer experience.
Yeah, that's my experience as well, that right now the market is very focused on the sales side of it. It's not focused on the compliance side as much as it has been historically. Yeah.
All right, how about tools for small businesses? Hot or not?
Hot.
Hot. Okay, what kind? Are there any particular things that stand out?
Online lending.
Online lending? Eric, what do you
Yeah,
think about that?
TM.
Yeah.
TM for small business.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the first presenter was talking about the 35 days or 40 days trying to get that down.
And what about sort of larger business, commercial customers, obviously a big part of community banking. Any particular technologies really sort of like crying out the need to be able to address from that perspective?
I mean, this is embarrassing to admit because it is so Stone Age. Really increasing the performance of our CRM and pipeline and kind of sales process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that there is the beginnings of a wave going on that is focused on what digital did in the retail channel, now digital is doing in the commercial side of the equation. I think that's starting.
All right, I've left the best for last. Blockchain. How can anything happen today without talking about blockchain?
It's really big in the community
side. Hot
side.
or not?
Not.
You're not looking for the community bank blockchain solution?
I want to know who comes into my branches. I mean, no, blockchain.
They're at the end of the chain.
Yeah, blockchain I have no doubt will add value, but there's just not a use case for us today.
Eric, anything else on that?
I just think that blockchain will hit the community banks when the core think that it's important.
I agree. It's like what we said earlier. If there is a product around it, and the core can integrate it, I'm sure we will use it. But until there's a specific product and until it's integrated, there's some very basic blocking and tackling we need to take care of first.
Excellent. We're going to go ahead and leave it there. Matt, Eric, thank you both very much. Really appreciate it.
Nicely.